Hello friends, we're going to try something a little different today. You are looking at Mark chapter 1 verses 21 through 28, which is the gospel reading for the fourth Sunday in ordinary time according to the common lectionary. I'd like to give you a moment to read through this passage. You can pause the presentation. Once you've done that, we can see how well we understand these words and phrases that are in bold red, because we're going to be exploring each of those. You know, often when Western people read the Gospels or anything else in the Bible, they read into the text culturally inappropriate ideas that distort what they're reading. So let's take a moment now to read the Gospel passage and pause the video. Now, okay, let's look closely at what we just read. Then they came to Capernaum. They. Who is they? They would be Jesus and his first followers, according to Mark chapter 1, verses 16 through 20. Poor and despised Galilean fishermen, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. You know, we saw in another presentation that those four young men were the first followers of Jesus, according to the gospel we call Mark. But the gospel called John disagrees with Mark as to whom Jesus' first followers were and where exactly he met them. We explored that in this previous presentation, which I invite you to watch after this. Don't mix up the Gospels like a cake batter. Each Gospel has its own storyline, and mixing into it details from other Gospels, like we do with all our Christmas observances, Passion plays, and Jesus movies damages the Gospels. It does violence to them. Don't do that. By the way, why would Jesus call together a faction of Galilean nothing people fishermen? Probably teenagers. Here is another video presentation for you to explore why after this. So okay, they would be Jesus, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Then they came to Capernaum. What's that? Well, don't think of Capernaum as a city. It was actually just a modest village in Jesus' day. The authors of the Gospels use the term polis, ancient Mediterranean urban center, very imprecisely. If you're interested in exploring how they do that, we did a presentation some time ago on the anonymous author called Luke and how he loved turning peasant villages into ancient cities. You can watch it after this. Anyway, although population figures for antiquity are notoriously difficult to reach, recent estimates for Capernaum in the days of Jesus were probably somewhere around 1,500 people. Nazareth was a tiny, insignificant hamlet of no more than 200 people, if that. Comparatively, the temple polis called Jerusalem had about 35,000 people. Notice how in Mark chapter 1 verse 33 it says, "All the city was gathered together at the door." So there were over 30,000 people at Peter's home? Are you smoking the devil's lettuce? Come on, that isn't working. The gospel writers are notorious for exaggerations and honoring nothing places associated with Jesus because they're heaping honors onto Jesus, the Master. And so they turn villages associated with him into magnificent Mediterranean urban centers. Modern English translators are embarrassed by this. Sometimes they'll fix the city reference and they'll put in town. But that's just hiding what the evangelists were doing. The evangelists knew what they were writing. They were trying to turn Jesus' places of origin, places that were associated with him, into great places because Jesus is great. I get it. I understand. In fact, I can even respect how they, in culturally appropriate ways, were trying to honor Jesus. Likely, the evangelists had never traveled to the Galilee. They lived far away. These urban elite scribes lived generations after and were far removed from Jesus' peasant life. Okay, so back to the text. Then they came to Capernaum, and on the Sabbath, Jesus entered the synagogue and taught. Okay, we've got a lot to unpack right there. What is the Sabbath? Did Jesus see it as the Jewish day of worship observant Jews understand it to be today? And what was the synagogue Jesus entered? Are we talking about a Jewish congregation? When you read that, are you thinking that Jesus is entering a sacred building where a Jewish assembly meets for religious purposes, like instruction and worship? and that he's doing this as a religiously observant Jew on a Jewish day of worship, the Sabbath? If so, I'm sorry to tell you that you have wrong scenarios in your head that are keeping you from understanding what is actually being reported in Mark. Don't look for any Jews or anything Jewish in the Bible. You'll never find it. First century Israelites were not Jews. I know, your English Bible tells you otherwise, and everyone you know thinks they were, and your pastor or priest or even rabbi have told you differently. Well, first of all, the English translations we have suck. There were no Jews, Christians, or pagans in the scriptures. Whenever you see those translated, it's incorrect. And spurious familiarity sucks also. Everyone can be spuriously familiar with who they imagine Jesus to be, and be wrong nonetheless. In the first century, a synagogue was not a place of worship, Jewish or otherwise. It was an Israelite male hangout place. Scholar Heather McKay has smashed anachronistic ideas concerning synagogues in Jesus' day. They didn't become places of worship or anything resembling modern synagogues until about 200 Common Era. In the first century, a synagogue was a community center. There, first century Israelite men gathered to cuss, spit, laugh, hear readings from political religious texts like Isaiah and the Torah, and get into heated arguments about them. But they never gathered in them for worship services. And the reason for that is because there were none in synagogues back in those days. Besides, the first century Sabbath was different than the later Jewish Sabbath. First century Sabbath was about rest, not worship. Later on, Palestinian Yahwists would transform the Sabbath into a day of worship, probably reacting to Messianist Israelites assembling on the seventh day for the Lord's Supper. We have a whole video presentation on this, which you can watch after this one. Be brave, ladies and gentlemen. Smashing ideas and putting on a new mind is essential if you really do want to follow Jesus. Okay, so 5 nothing people, 5 despised peasants at the bottom of the honor scale. Jesus and his 4 teenaged followers, on the Israelite day of rest, enter the Israelite male hangout place. And Jesus, the illiterate Galilean peasant, teaches. Wrap your head around that for a moment. In this honor-shame culture, think about how people would be shaken by this. Jesus, the illiterate Galilean peasant, teaches. People were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Okay, let's stop. People were astonished. Who are these people listening to this, watching this? Are they men? Are they women? Are they a mixed group of men and women? Folks, these are all post-pubescent Israelite males. Our American hearts really feel good to think that there are women in this group, but that's just our ethnocentrism at work demanding everyone and everything be American. This is not a mixed group of people. They're Israelite males all. Remember, synagogue is an all-male Israelite hangout place. And these men are astonished, and it makes sense why, right? The historical Jesus was not an intellectual sage. Rather, Jesus was a peasant artisan and day laborer. Peasant artisans and day laborers don't get up and speak in public in this ancient society. They don't have the authority to do that. Authority. In the Bible, authority means the ability, actual or assumed, to control the behavior of others. This is an all-important biblical issue, and it appears repeatedly throughout the Gospels. It does so because persons who acted out of character with their station, that is, their honor status at birth, caused immediate concern in ancient Mediterranean communities. Why? Because such behavior knocked everyone's social compass askew, and people became unsure just how to behave. Think about it. Jesus is an artisan, a village day laborer. Such a person would definitely not have been expected to speak in public. So Jesus' hearers are shocked. Now, if we've been reading the gospel called Mark from the very first verse, we have already been let in on Jesus' justification for doing so. Jesus' teaching here in the synagogue at Capernaum is just him asserting his role as who he really is, Israelite holy man and prophet. Hence, a son of God, or one who has the qualities of God, what anthropologists call a shaman. Many Western people today, including clergy and academics, and even atheists who admire Jesus, or who they think Jesus was, are addicted to seeing Jesus as an intellectual sage. Why? It's because we crave a Jesus who is either like us, or like our idealized autobiography, who we want to be. Here's a presentation on why the historical Jesus was definitely not an intellectual sage. You can watch it after this. So it goes, "In their synagogue was a man with an unclean spirit. He cried out, 'What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God.'" Okay, let's break that down. In antiquity, all ancient people believed that every effect had a personal cause. In the Gospels, the question is never what happened, but instead, who did it? Biblical people had no idea about impersonal causality. Every significant effect in a person's or group's life was believed to have been caused by a who, a person, not a what. And the person who caused it was either a human person or an other than human person, a non-human person. This was true not only at the level of ordinary society, but at the levels of nature and the cosmos as well. There's no way to say in biblical Hebrew, "it rained." The correct phrase was, "God sent the rains." See? A personal cause. Things beyond human control, such as the weather, earthquakes, disease, and fertility, were believed to be controlled by non-human persons who operated in a cosmic social hierarchy. You can see that right there. So the unclean spirit that is afflicting the man in the synagogue must be a personified force that has the power to control human behavior. Accusations of demon possession were based on the belief that forces beyond human control were in fact causing the effects humans observed. Because evil attacks good, ancient people, like people in the Gospels, expected to be assaulted. A person accused of demon possession was a person whose behavior, the external symptom, was socially deviant, or who was embedded into a matrix of deviant social relationships. Such a deviant situation or behavior required explanation and could be attributed to God, which would be a positive explanation, or to evil forces, and that would be a dangerous situation. Something that the community would be anxious to clarify. Is this from God or from demons? Think about how many times people are talking about Jesus and asking that question. Does he come from God or from the evil one? They need to identify. They're anxious to identify and expel persons who represent threats to the community. Possessed persons, therefore, were excluded people, excluded from the community. So when Jesus frees somebody from demons, that's not only implying that he's an exorcist exorcising the demon, but also that Jesus is someone who can restore this other person into a meaningful place in the community also. Therefore, it's imprecise to just call Jesus an exorcist. It's more accurate to refer to this shamanic holy man Jesus as a folk healer. And Bible Alive Presentations features a number of videos on these relevant topics, including this one here, which explores the crucial difference between healing social illnesses and curing biomedical diseases. And also this presentation that explores just what a shamanic holy man was, like ancient Israelites such as Jesus and Paul. I invite you to enjoy these presentations after this. Okay, so back to the Sunday Gospel. In their synagogue was a man with an unclean spirit. He cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." In antiquity, social stereotypes were encoded into names. These social labels provide hearers with all they need to know in order to place a person on the honor scale, and thus provided everybody directions for social interactions. The demon calls Jesus, Jesus of Nazareth. The name Jesus of Nazareth encodes social information all people in the region of Galilee would have understood. Jesus is a nothing person peasant from a nothing place filled with nothing people. But the unclean spirit doesn't stop there. It goes on to identify Jesus as the Holy One of God. No, neither the anonymous author we call Mark, nor the demon in this story knows anything about the Trinity of God, or Jesus being the second person of the Trinity. This is not a Christological statement. Holy One of God is another way of saying Son of God, which doesn't mean God the Son yet. It means someone having divine qualities. In other words, a holy man. In other words, the demon is saying that Jesus is an Israelite, shamanic, holy man. The demon acknowledges another status for Jesus that the crowd will soon see demonstrated. The Israelite holy man Jesus can exorcise and heal. Jesus rebuked the demon and said, "Quiet, come out of him." The unclean spirit convulsed him and with a loud cry came out of him. All were amazed and asked one another, "What is this?" A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. Jesus' fame spread everywhere throughout the whole region of Galilee. What is fame? Well, fame means honor, the most important social value in the cultural world of the Gospels. The report of what Jesus did here at the synagogue spreads like wildfire throughout Jesus' home territory, throughout the entire Galilee, where the appellation Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus the nothing person from the nothing place, would have encoded his expected honor status. There's nothing to be expected from this worthless peasant day labor POS. Wait a minute, what did he do? How could he do that? Here, the Gossip Network serves two purposes that are unfamiliar to American readers. The first purpose is to inform the Israelite community of Jesus' new social status. No, he's not a POS from Nazareth, place of POS people. No, he's a holy man. He's a folk healer. The second purpose the Gossip Network serves is to restore the possessed man who got healed to really being healed. That is to say, restoring him to his rightful place in the community. In the case of Jesus, honor has been gained. In the case of the possessed man, honor has been restored. Both require public validation in this collectivistic society. Look carefully at the definition of honor, the most important social value of the Bible. So, my friends, hopefully I have given you something to chew on regarding the Sunday Gospel. I invite all watchers here, including preachers, homilists, please get the wrong ideas away from the Gospel readings, away from the Bible. Let's read and preach these Gospels respectfully.